Welcome to Health, Wellbeing and Lifestyle, where experts in the field inform, educate and inspire the community to be healthier, balanced and live the lifestyle they love. Our first guest today is health coach Denise Mokadsi. We'll be discussing the topic, are you feeling powerless about your health? Epigenetics and a personalised lifestyle can help you prevent chronic disease. Welcome, Denise.
Hi, how are you going?
Denise, you say you have more control over preventing chronic disease than we think. Can you explain what you mean by that?
A lot of people think that we're at the mercy of our genes, and we're actually not. About 80% of our lifestyle diseases are related to how we're living. This sort of becomes around the topic of epigenetics. And epigenetics is probably something that people have heard before, but maybe not be quite sure about what it is, yes. And a good way to understand it is to break it down. I like to break it down into the two parts. So the epi, the first part of the epigenetics refers to on top or above, and the genetics is our DNA. So most people understand, we've got genetics, we've got DNA. But a lot of the things that we do and how we show up in the world is a result of how those genes are expressed. These genes can be altered by things that sit on top of the genes or affect the genes, and that's the part of the epigenetics. So it really does come down to lifestyle, and all of the things that we do in our lifestyle influences where these markers might go or how these genes are either turned on or silenced. So that's how we can have a lot of control, more control over what happens to our health. And we're not really at the mercy of just getting a chronic disease or an illness. Most of us who, how we do end up getting sick differs so much. You might know someone that has lived a certain way, like maybe smoked their whole life and has never been sick. Or someone else has gotten lung cancer. Why is it that we can do similar things to other people, but our results can be very different? And that is really because of our genetics. And this is where things that we do constantly doesn't necessarily need to lead to a chronic disease. Everybody will respond to stress a different way, and it's really about understanding your genes and knowing what we can do to help prevent those kind of lifestyle illnesses.
Can you give us an example of how tailoring an approach to someone's genetics or their personal biology could make a difference?
Tailoring approach is really helpful because it does save a lot of guesswork. People can try lots of different things, and you might have heard someone does very well with intermittent fasting or to be on a keto diet, so someone might try to do that as well and find that it doesn't work for them. So there's no problem with people trying things. That's definitely a strategy, but it can put people into more of a stress response if they're doing something that's against their genetics or their natural biology. And so we can personalise particular strategies for people by understanding what their biology is and what their DNA or genetics is best suited to, and personalised strategies for them knowing that, so they don't have to go through the guesswork. So I can give you some examples around all the lifestyle strategies or lifestyle things that we do. Very common, food. Everyone eating different foods can be very challenging, trying to work out a different diet, like should I be vegetarian, should I be carnivore? But when we do genetic testing, we can see that someone's biology will be better suited to metabolising vegetables, for example, or they're better responding with carbohydrates, or better responding to proteins or fats. So this can help us set a diet or a nutritional approach around the things that suit their body better. So if they're very responsive to carbohydrates, eating a diet with more carbohydrates is going to be very beneficial for them, rather than avoiding carbohydrates because they think that they should, or that avoiding carbohydrates for someone else was good for that person, but it might not necessarily be good for this person. Similarly, with exercise and workout, you see a lot of people trying to do workouts that worked really well for other people, like the HIIT kind of style, you know, the F45 and the CrossFit and all of the high intensity kind of intervals where people can get results if their body is suited to that kind of training. Someone who has the genetics that is better suited to strength training or endurance type training would do better or get better results doing that kind of activity. And so we just want to try to avoid putting the body under unnecessary stress by knowing how to match people's lifestyles to, you know, what they've been born with, basically.
Denise, what are some tips you've got for our viewers in terms of them taking control of their long-term health?
Definitely for long-term health, so that we're avoiding or preventing the chronic health issues that we see, you know, the diabetes, the obesity, osteopenia, osteoporosis, all these kind of chronic diseases. We can really avoid those by 3 simple things. Well, there's more, but I will limit it to 3. So thinking about eating healthy, and while we can personalise how that might look for somebody, what foods exactly they're eating, how much of certain types of foods, so what percentages of carbohydrates, proteins and fats, and also the timings of when people eat. That's really important too, the chronobiology of when we should be eating, like how our body best metabolises foods. For most people, avoiding processed foods and eating whole foods in their natural state is going to be a really good tip for longevity and healthy living into the future with, you know, trying to avoid those chronic illnesses. Sleep's really important. So chronic illness really comes down to how can we manage the stress on our body, and if we can get decent sleep, 6 to 8 hours per night, that's very beneficial for healthy aging and longevity, because when we sleep, so much of repair and recovery is happening, and if we shortchange that, then we're going to miss out on recovering properly, that we get this continued stress day after day after day, which really builds up and can bring us into those chronic ill health states. And just having a really mindful mindset, I guess, a positive mindset, because how we see ourselves and the people around us and our belief systems is a very big influence on our stress load, like how we manage what we're experiencing day to day. So I think getting on top of those 3 things is going to help people move the dial quite a lot towards healthy aging and living, you know, longer, healthier. Another important thing is that we can try lots of things, but if someone's really struggling, it's probably better to go and seek professional advice so that you can get on top of the things and they don't get worse. So yeah, I would always recommend seeking professional advice to help people with their health and well-being where they're stuck.
Thanks for such valuable information, Denise. If you'd like to know more about how epigenetics can help prevent chronic disease and improve your lifestyle, and more about Denise Mokadsi, please go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And after the break, we have another interesting guest with another interesting topic. Stay tuned. After the break, urban food specialist Marc Noyce is talking about innovative systems that make gardening easier. Welcome back. Our second guest today is urban food specialist Marc Noyce, and the topic we'll be discussing is innovative systems that make gardening easier. Welcome, Marc.
Hi Megan, thank you very much for having me.
Gardening's come a long way. What are some of the latest trends?
Well, let's look at where gardening come from. Where we grew plants in broad acre farming, which we still do. We've been doing that for thousands of years, and it's got us to where we are today, which is fantastic. But most of our population lives in urban cities. We live near the coast, and we congregate in an urban jungle, basically, and we don't have access to those same broad acre farms. We're actually building over our traditional food bowls as fast as humanly possible. So here in Melbourne, for example, our food comes more than 100 kilometres from where we're sitting right now, every day of the week. So we've got to bring in food now from a long distance, and in some cases, some of our food travels thousands of kilometres to get to it. We call that food miles. What we're trying to do is turn food miles into food metres by growing our own food in our backyard or on our balcony. So food has come a long way in terms of how we grow. There are lots of different ways to grow food, and some of the challenges are, how do we do that in an urban environment?
Marc, you've talked about the wicking garden beds a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
So a wicking garden bed is not just like a garden bed in your backyard or a pot, for example. In your backyard, you might have a raised garden bed. It might just be at soil level where you grow some food. You put water on there, and quite often that water just goes straight through the garden bed, past the roots, and you're actually watering next door neighbour's trees instead. You put your nutrients on there. You buy some nutrients from the hardware store or the supermarket, and you pour those nutrients on, and they again go straight past your plants, your seedlings, and make your next door neighbour's trees look really fantastic. Gets into the groundwater and it's gone. In a pot, for example, where you pour water on there, it just goes down the sides and you think you've watered your pot, but if you actually break that apart, you'll find that it's really dry. And because when potting mix dries out, it doesn't attract water anymore. So what we want to do is we want to try to hold that water in the pot. So self-watering pots are just a really fantastic way of having a water reservoir in the bottom of the pot and allowing that water to rise up through the potting mix as the plant needs it 24/7. And we call that a wicking garden bed, where if you've ever had a dishcloth in water, you might notice that it rises up out of the water as it travels up the dishcloth. That's called capillary action. It's called wicking, and it's how water can travel up from a water reservoir up through the potting mix and then be available to the plant or the seedlings or whatever you're growing in there whenever that plant needs it. And it just does it naturally. So as it's being drawn up from the bottom through capillary action, a plant reaches down with its roots and sucks it up through suction. So when suction meets wicking, you've got a very happy plant. So a wicking garden bed is a containerised, sealed system that is perched above the water in the soil, so that we're holding that where the plants are for later. Because when it rains, we get a lot of excess rain in our urban environments, and a wicking garden bed captures that in its space for later reuse. So it's very climate adaptive. We can get through a lot of heat waves, and in some cases we can get our plants to survive for weeks at a time in the one containerised system. Let's look at a wicking garden bed. Its elements are: there's a sealed container, there's a water reservoir in the base, which is generally rock, then there's a geotextile layer to separate the rock and the water from the potting mix, then we put our potting mix on top, and then we plant in that, and the water wicks up through capillary action into the potting mix to allow the plants to grow. That's how a wicking garden bed works, or a self-watering pot plant works. There are some advances now where these wicking garden beds have a water reservoir with cones and an air gap between the water and the potting mix, so that we can have free draining and wicking at the same time. And that prevents root rot. You don't want root rot in a container because it goes pretty smelly actually. So by getting a little bit of oxygen, you allow the water to move up through the potting mix, you allow the potting mix to breathe, and I like oxygen and so do plants. So they like to breathe too. Allowing them to breathe gets it much healthier. Allowing the plants to breathe lets them grow more optimally. And so you're going to get the best out of your garden bed if you've got a wicking garden bed that can breathe.
That's fantastic information, Marc. So Marc, what's some advice for our audience in creating their own urban garden bed?
Megan, setting up your own urban garden is actually quite easy. With a wicking garden bed, for example, you can avoid losing all your water, you can avoid having roots come into it from your next door neighbour's trees, you can actually make it very ergonomic by getting up off the ground and having that raised garden bed so that you're not bending and hurting your back when you're watering or tending to your garden. You can set up an urban farm really quickly these days by having a connectable modular garden bed system that takes the hard work out of gardening. Imagine coming home on a hot day and then you see your garden bed just wilting and dying because you haven't been there to water it. Well, a weekend garden bed solves that. A weekend garden bed gives the plants exactly what it needs 24/7. So certain types of plants can access water all the time versus others that don't like a lot of water can just take what they need, and just more comes up naturally through a weekend garden bed.
Wow, that's fantastic information there, Marc. Thank you. If you'd like to know more about Marc and the innovative systems that make gardening easier, go to his webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au, and after the break we'll have another interesting guest and another interesting topic. Stay tuned. After the break, Sue Williams, Doctor of Quantum Counselling and Clinical Hypnotherapist, will be talking about what happens in your brain under hypnosis, unveiling the science. Welcome back. Our next guest, Sue Williams, is a Doctor of Quantum Counselling and a clinical hypnotherapist, and the topic we'll be discussing today is what happens in your brain under hypnosis. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Megan. It's lovely to be here again.
So, Sue, what does actually happen in your brain when you're under hypnosis?
So I should just explain our levels of consciousness first. So we are in our normal conscious awareness at the moment. We're using the frontal lobe in our brain to create our thoughts, and in this brainwave, which is beta, it allows us to plan, to think of things in the future, which is an unusual concept. I imagine it's specific to humans, but it's something that we create rather than something that is actually happening, but we're using our consciousness, our awareness. If we're doing a project, if we're doing anything that requires us to do calculations or be creative, that sort of thing. So that's our conscious awareness in the beta brainwave. If we get really excited, it can go up to high beta. And these are all brainwaves that can be monitored with electrical equipment, so we know exactly what that brainwave is at any particular time if we need to. So for hypnosis, we go down to a lower brainwave, a slower brainwave, which is alpha, and that normally is the precursor for going to sleep. So our mind quietens, it just slows down a bit, and then that allows the analytical conscious mind just to drift off and do its own thing for a while, and our subconscious mind then can come forward and we can deal with that in our hypnosis sessions. Further down than that, if we go into an unconscious state, then we're going down into even deeper, slower brain waves. So that's when we're in a really deep sleep or for any other reason that we may be unconscious, but we're not aware. We are aware in hypnosis when we're in that alpha brainwave, and that is what makes the sessions so accessible for people to discuss things, because they can speak quite normally and hear what the hypnotherapist is saying. So they are still aware, but they're just not in this normal awareness that we have for most of the day. As humans, we're in and out of trance all day. People say, I can't be hypnotised. And I think, well, have you ever experienced reading a really good book, something where you get really engrossed? You're sitting there reading, your conscious mind is creating all the scenes from the words, and you're experiencing everything that's happening in that book. And you're, oh, an hour's gone by and I haven't even realised it. So you, in essence, have been in trance. Or if you go a similar route from work to home each day, You leave work and you're planning whatever else you have to do. You have to go and buy groceries, or you have to take the kids to sport or whatever. And you get home and you think, how did I get here? And your subconscious mind has taken over because it knows how to drive. If it's a regular route that you go through, it knows which intersections you have to be careful at. And you are being perfectly safe because that's subconscious mind's job, to keep you safe. So it's something that we do regularly, all day, every day, in and out of trance, just for a few seconds perhaps, or for longer, depending on what we're doing.
Is there any scientific evidence to back it up?
Oh, absolutely. If we go back to the 18th century, so the 1700s, Franz Mesmer, people will know the term being mesmerised, being really engrossed in something. He was probably one of the fathers of more modern hypnosis. It changed from just trance to being hypnosis. And through the 19th century, there were further developments, but it really got going in the 20th century with a lot of scientific research, how the mind works specifically during hypnosis. I know in a lot of movies they show that you can have your mind taken over by the hypnotist, and that person can make you do all sorts of things that you would not normally do. Well, in real life, it's almost impossible for the hypnotherapist to take over your brain, because your morals, your thought patterns, the way you live your life is so strong within you. So don't be scared about what you see in the movies, because it's not possible in normal hypnotherapy sessions.
What can you offer our audience that would like to go on this journey themselves?
I've said many times, I wish people would come to the hypnotherapist as their first port of call, not as that last desperate effort to find help. And because it's becoming to be more widespread, hypnotherapists are tending to specialise. In the past, you would go to a hypnotherapist for just everything, like you would go to a GP. But now you can actually go straight to that specialist hypnotherapist. So if you have a lot of stress, if you have anxiety, depression, that type of thing, we have so many really good qualified hypnotherapists who can help you specifically with that. My practice is helping athletes and sporting teams, and by doing that I can help them with their mental focus, get them to train their own brains so that when they're on the starting line or out with the team waiting for the whistle to blow, they go into the zone. So we can train them to do that. We can train them to use their mind to overcome injuries so that they can get back on the field so much quicker. Very common ones obviously are ceasing smoking and shedding weight. So there are a lot of specialist practitioners who can help you with that as well. And I really have not heard of anyone who's not a genuine, caring, helping person.
Thanks so much, Sue. If you'd like to know more about Sue Williams and what happens to your brain when it's under hypnosis, please go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And we'll say goodbye for now and see you next week. If you'd like to know more about our show, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel.